everyone. On behalf of EPPIC Global, welcome to the Spotlight Series. My name is Anu. Our featured guest today is Sara Kenkare Mitra. She is Senior Vice President of Development Science at Genentech. Before we get into the interview with Sara, what is EPPIC Global? I've got the president of EPPIC Global here with me. His name is Robert DeFeo, and he's going to share with us a little bit about EPPIC Global and its initiatives. Hi, Robert.
Yeah, Anu, how are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you.
You as well.
Oh, thank you. So would you share with us a little bit about EPPIC Global, what they do and what their initiatives are?
Absolutely. So EPPIC Global is a professional nonprofit, and our focus is to really support our member base through opportunities in mentorship, networking, and entrepreneurship. We've held a number of events in the past year, 5 web-based as well as 2 of these EPPIC Spotlights. Next year, we're really excited to hope to get back to in-person conferences, but we'll of course see how that goes. But in any case, we're definitely planning to launch a mentorship program, which people can access through our website, and we'll continue putting out great web-based content like this interview you're about to see today. So if you're interested to learn more, go to our website, eppicglobal.org, or follow us on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for that. Hi, folks. Well, on with the interview. Hi, Sara. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Anu. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, Sara, your background is extraordinary. You are serving as the Senior Vice President of Development Science at Genentech. You oversee an organization of over 600 people. You've been at Genentech over 20 years, and throughout your career, you have won numerous awards. The most recent one being the very prestigious Alice E. Till Advancement for Women in Pharmaceutical Science Award. You've been a co-founder, you've served on the steering committee as chair for Women in Sciences and Engineering, and you've also served on the board of directors of the Genentech Foundation, where you've taken great initiatives and made great efforts towards careers for future generations. You have earned your PhD in biopharmaceutical sciences at UCSF, where you stayed on as a postdoc fellow prior to joining Genentech. So my first question, tell me about your role at Genentech.
Well, thanks for that introduction. So I run as you said, I run this organization called Development Sciences. And Development Sciences is sort of this translational science organization. In simple words, it really is responsible for all the scientific work that happens during drug development. And we work with our research colleagues on programs and new discoveries that are coming out of research, but then really transform them or translate them into molecule discoveries, and then moving them through the clinic and all the pharmacology, safety, dose optimization, like determining whether a drug works, doesn't work, how do you find activity, etc., all the way until a drug actually makes it to be a drug in patients and gets on the market. So I've had the fortune to do this as a leader of development sciences across many therapeutic areas, across many different drug modalities, and we get to work across the whole gamut of the company, from research all the way through commercialization.
That is so fascinating. So I'm curious now, what has been your journey that's led you to the sciences?
Yeah. So my inspiration for getting into the science actually started from childhood. My grandfather was a physician, and whether it was purposeful or not, I sort of was so taken by the fact that his stories of being a physician, my bedtime stories were stories from him. And I used to always say, oh, I'm just going to be like you, and he would always say, you're going to be a doctor like me. So it started actually with a wish and a desire, perhaps without, it's sort of the kind of thing that kids say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would always say, I want to be a doctor, like my grandpa. And so I think that the first seeds started there. But then throughout the school years, like many, I had interest in science and math, and I was really good at those subjects. But I always kept the thread of being in medicine as the thread to it. I never thought about anything else as I was, going through school. Most of my friends would say I was a very serious student. But I also enjoyed other things, but I was very serious about my studies. And I had this purpose that I was going to actually be in medicine. I did want to become a doctor. It didn't quite turn out that way, But I decided that I was still going to go into the pharmaceutical sciences because I was interested in making medicine. And so getting into research and doing something innovative so we can come up with, medicines for diseases that are not treated became my next purpose. But it really started from that childhood dream of being a doctor, really giving medicines to patients, healing, etc.
That is so amazing that, from childhood, that was the one thing that you wanted to do. And
Yeah.
here you are. Genentech has taken on great efforts when it comes to tackling the challenge of gender diversity. Can you speak a little bit about your initiatives with that?
Yeah, so when I'll go back in time in my early years at Genentech, it was an amazing, like it was biotech, it was a smaller company. But if you looked around the company, particularly the leadership, if you look at directors and vice presidents, etc., they were predominantly male. And there were a few women, in those ranks. And so it became obvious at Genentech. And I remember our CEO at the time, Art Levinson, really, really calling this out publicly in our meetings and saying, like, where are the women? Where are the women? And there were all of us that were scientists. There were women in the ranks of scientists. I was a scientist, but there weren't any in these leadership roles. And so I think his calling it out was, to me, the first sign that it mattered. And it wasn't just for the sake of men versus women, but more like, can we bring diversity to the table at leadership levels? Um, since then, the company, of course, has had a number of initiatives around sort of, making sure that women, and now it's people of color, and making sure that diverse voices are at the table. For me personally, this journey has been really important because, I noticed that as I was growing in these leadership roles, I felt that law of small numbers. When you're the only woman in the room, and I've been there in those meetings, you may be the most confident person on earth, but when you're in that room, there's something about that dynamic of being the only person of X, whatever that might be, that makes you, either feel somehow like your confidence is dented, like, should you be saying certain things or not? And I did go through those phases. So I really, through my own experience, understand that, right? So what I can speak a little bit about the kinds of things that I've done. And my whole point has been to mentor. Because I think mentorship is so important. I had great mentors as I was going through those years. Mentors who would help me out when I had a question, when I was in a tricky situation, or just if I needed career advice. And so, firstly, I really believe in mentorship. And I don't think mentorship has to be some formal, rigorous process. It's about having people that have your back, that you can confidently have a conversation with, and that they will give you their perspective on what they believe should be the right thing, and that helps you to develop and to grow. So what we've done is, in the last 10 years, there were a couple of things we did. There was specifically this issue with women in science and engineering, and we found that in our organization, even not only development science, but in the R&D space, there were a lot of women scientists, but even women scientists, the numbers were smaller. And then as you saw them up on the ranks, the numbers kept getting smaller and smaller. So we realized that there was a particular issue related to women in science that we needed to tackle. So we started this group called Genentech Women in Science and Engineering. And I've been, chair of the steering committee for this group. There's a core team of senior female leaders that runs this. And they have been very successful in the last, 10 years. What we've been doing is to really have programs, education, support, mentorship, to help women to develop and to get over any of the barriers that they have. We also have programs across Genentech. There's a Genentech Women's Professionals program, very similar. The goals are very similar. The other things were things like talent reviews, really paying attention. I think every leader just needs to ask the right question. I often think I didn't really do much more than that, which is to just say, hey, where are the women? Or, hey, where are the men? Whatever that might
Yeah.
be. Where are these X people? Why are we missing these voices at the table? And just sort of, nudging and encouraging people to keep that in mind. And if someone said, well, I've been trying, I can't recruit enough women. Okay, let's get to the bottom of that. Where are you recruiting from? Are you recruiting from colleges that are already carrying that bias with them? Then you're going to be in trouble. So you have to, sort of widen your lens. Things like that. Really paying attention to these things with a specific goal that we're going to actually try to work towards that. Also, things like if you're in committee meetings, etc. And as I said, there were times in committee meetings where I'd be the only woman at the table, and I did feel that feeling of like being the lone voice from a minority, let's say. But as we've grown the number of women at the table, at a certain point, the balance changes, and you suddenly see women speaking up more. They are really sharing their thoughts and ideas, and they're working around any kind of unconscious bias that might exist around them.
That's really remarkable, Sara, because a lot of times people talk about making these things happen, but it really takes a concerted effort and focus and energy and time and an investment to make this happen.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. So my next question to you is, as a female leader, what has been a pretty significant barrier to success, and how have you overcome it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when I think about barriers, to me, there are two types of barriers. One is an internal barrier, and the other one is the external barrier. So I'll talk about both of them. I think for me, the internal barrier, and I think this is true of so many of the women that I meet and mentor, and literally I can pretty much predict the question, and it's often the voice in our heads, right? And it's often what, things like imposter syndrome, asking your own confidence of whether you're good enough or whether you're showing up correctly, and just fighting that battle within your head. And I think for me, particularly in my early days of leadership, that clearly was a barrier for me. And I wouldn't even call out any of the external barriers, because until I took care of the internal barrier, these other barriers didn't matter. So it was the ability to, particularly because I'd come, from India, I'd come into graduate school here, I'd gone through my education here, and then coming into industry, and still always feeling like, do I belong? Do I not belong? Who am I? What am I? Where do I stand? These were the questions in my own head, and I had to overcome those over time and really put effort around really thinking through that. The external barrier was around, particularly I remember in the early days, when I'd sit on some of these important committees at Genentech, etc. I felt like there was a certain way one needed to be. I even got feedback from some people saying, like, you need to be more aggressive in your style. You need to be more loud and all this kind of stuff. And I even thought about that, like, gosh, I would have to completely change myself to be like some of these men that were sitting around me. And I actually made a decision that I wasn't going to do that, that I really needed to be my authentic self. I would bring my style to the table. And in fact, I thought it was my opportunity to influence my colleagues to move their style a little bit, because sometimes the style would become very loud and aggressive, versus shifting a bit in their style closer to me allowed me to also shift it. At the same time, I did think about, you have to grow certain muscles that you may need at certain periods of time. And so this idea that, just like you go to the gym and you exercise so that you have strong biceps, not because you're going to knock someone out every day, but because, you want to be able to lift things when you need to lift things, etc. It's the same way. I mean, you do need to have those muscles so that at the right appropriate moment, if you need to flex your style because that moment deserves it, you need to be able to get it out. So this sort of barrier, which is a perceived barrier, and perhaps even an implied barrier by the people in the room that, oh, if you're at that table, you need to be a certain way, was a barrier that I had to get around. My way was to try and be closer to my own style. Of course, evolve it, not be rigid around it, but bring myself to the table, whatever, and I believe that myself is me today, but everything that has happened in the past, that comes with me when I come to the table. And so that's what you'll get.
Here at Genentech, the company is partnered with the South San Francisco School District, and by way of Future Lab, it's a science education program. You have put forth great efforts and initiatives towards, helping over 9,000 kids per year.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about your role in that a little bit?
Yeah, happy to. This particular effort really makes me feel like warm and proud. I probably had this much of a role in it compared to what Genentech has done. So I really got into it when I was on the Genentech Foundation as a board member. I got off the foundation last year. I finished my tenure. But during the time that I was on the foundation board, we were really getting very serious about our efforts in the South San Francisco School District. And the overall, effort is actually pretty broad. It involves kids throughout the K to 12 spectrum. And so we've got programs for kids that are in elementary school. We've got, it's called the Gene Academy. It's around mentoring. There's a program for kids that are, 8th grade. There's a real, sort of Future Lab, which is like there are competitions and scholarships, etc., to encourage these kids. And then kids in high school, we built the Science Garage, and that's where I got to get really involved in the Science Garage activity, because we built like a state-of-the-art lab in the South San Francisco High School District school. And the idea, and we built an entire curriculum. This is a 4-year program to encourage the kids to really enjoy biotechnology. I think the data is pretty clear that kids tend to, if you really want this kind of pipeline for kids in STEM, you need to start really early. And so I think what I'm really proud about is that effort goes from the young ones all the way throughout the school system. This curriculum actually has been so popular that now there are efforts to expand it throughout the Bay Area and beyond, because other schools want the program, and I think it would be a great success. So I was just thrilled, because during those days when we were making the decisions and we were building the Science Garage, to see the building actually built, to be there for the inauguration, to be there to make decisions around what the labs should be like, etc., to me was an unbelievable experience. And it's just great to see that we've been able to do it. And it's part of our broader community here in South San Francisco.
Yeah, and impact, young folks, right?
Totally.
And yeah, provide them with opportunities to grow into.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. And many of these children come from families where parents haven't really even been through school or through high school, etc. So these are kids that are getting opportunities that would not even imagine a career in biotech, for example.
Yeah, it's wonderful, wonderful. Who has been the person in your life that has inspired you the most, and why?
Yeah. You think about someone that's actually been in the industry and all this stuff. But when I think about inspiration, I always think of my mom, because actually she didn't have any of this type of education. Neither was she in science, but she really had a lot of desire and interest and energy around it. And so during my childhood, she would spend so much time. She would talk about this. She would talk about the fact that she wanted me to dream, and she wanted me to think bigger, and she wanted me to not be in a mold. And she would speak about independence and being your own person and all this kind of stuff. And at the time, I didn't pay much attention to it. Other than just hearing it. But looking back, her energy was a huge inspiration for who I am today, because I carry that with me. She's no longer here, but I carry that with me, and I carry that spirit of trying to make things better, to not be okay with status quo for yourself and for others around you. So.
That's so beautiful. So my final question for you is, what is your advice to the future generations? What is your best career advice to them?
Yeah, boy, you know, I would say, and again, these are just my thoughts based on the people I mentor, the young people I mentor that are either coming out of high school or in college or in a graduate school. And what I often find is the thing I say to them is that there is no real substitution for time, hard work, and mastery. So if you think that you'll just do something really quickly, it's not going to happen. Things take time, and that you have to give things time. You have to spend time to develop depth in areas and subjects. You have to become a master at what you do, and that takes time. There are no shortcuts for it. There is no speed button on it. And so I think the first advice is like, don't be in a rush. Take the time to become a master with whatever you're doing. The other one is, it's probably a simple one, which is, again, there is no substitution for hard work. You do have to work hard. People say some people are lucky, but I think luck and hard work kind of go hand in hand. There is an element of luck
in it too,
for sure, but you can't have luck without the hard work, and the two have to go together. And so I think that's important. The other one is be yourself, be authentic. Don't be like someone else. Don't try to emulate someone else, because you actually won't bring out what's best in you.
Right. That's great advice. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and wish you all the best and all the success, and really hope to see you again sooner than later. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Folks, thanks for joining us. We will see you again next time. Bye-bye.